Hello and welcome to the Practical Animal channel. Today we're going to talk with Bob Dalton, who is a falconer of 50 years experience. He is an author and a magazine publisher, and one of those very rare people who uses his falconry skill set to aid in the conservation of birds of prey. We're going to talk about one of the most recent conservation projects that I've become aware of that Bob is the frontman for. Bob Dalton, welcome to the channel.
Morning, John. Thank you for having us again.
Bob, can you talk about your latest conservation expedition with the Lugger Falcon project?
Yeah, we went recently to, we were invited to Pakistan to help with preparing the ground for the rehabilitation of 74 falcons that had been illegally trapped and were in the process of being smuggled out of the country. These consisted mainly of peregrine falcons, Saker falcons, but there were some Lugger falcons amongst them. But as anybody who understands trapping in Pakistan will know, that for every peregrine and Saker sitting there, in all probability a Lugger falcon had died to obtain it by being used as live bait, what's known as barrack. The Pakistan Customs invited me personally to go over and help. This is because of work that's been going on behind the scenes that most people don't know about. And it was felt by myself and other people in the project that because they'd reached out to us before anybody else, that to not go would have been a real kick in the teeth for them. So we went. The only, not difficulty, but the only problem we had to surmount, those of us that wanted to go, is that Project Lugger is a charity, and written into the charity is no one can take any personal travelling expenses. So we had to find our own airfare, which was about £500, our own COVID test money, which was £225. But once in Pakistan, we were fed and housed by our hosts. So once we were there was no further expense. But either way, had there been, we still would have gone. This was something we had to take part in.
What was the goal of the expedition?
The goal of the expedition is to show to the Pakistan government, as well as customs and wildlife, that if they do snatch these consignments, these illegal consignments, they can be rehabilitated. Now, some of the keyboard warriors back in England who know everything there is to know about absolutely everything, but in actual fact know nothing, said, well, if they're perfectly healthy falcons, why can't you just go and release them immediately? There were several reasons for that. First of all, lots of them were not in good condition because they've been held for some considerable time. Secondly, of course, they've been snatched by customs and the Pakistan police, so there was sub judice until that is finished, so they couldn't be released. And thirdly, as all these keyboard warriors will be fully aware, it's still the height of the trapping, even though it's illegal, it's still the height of the trapping season in Pakistan till around mid-January. So to release them would in all probability just mean they'd be trapped the next day somewhere else. So the idea was to assess each individual falcon of the 74, or give our opinion, see to those that needed treatment, see to those that just needed feeding up and healthing. One or two needed imping, their feathers replaced where they'd been broken and all the ordeal they'd been through. And one of the biggest things that we could bring to bear is, and I'm not being rude to anybody, the raptor veterinary knowledge in Pakistan is nowhere near as good as it is here in Europe. So one of the vets that we have within the project is a world-class recognised raptor vet. So we were able to put him in Zoom conference contact with their vet in Pakistan. And accordingly, a lot of the falcons were treated on the advice of our vet from here. And quite a considerable number when we first went there were some that were quite ill, but with the intervention of our vet, other than one which unfortunately died, it was too far gone, we managed to pull them round. And in the time I was there, two more smaller groups of falcons were seized. And when I spoke to the Minister for Customs personally, he invited me to his house for dinner. He told us that us being there and the fact that the world was aware that people had come over to help gave them the confidence to carry on with the work they were doing. So a major, major win.
Fantastic. What were the health conditions faced by these falcons, Bob?
Pretty grim, to be honest, because they were hidden. There were 74 of them basically in a flat in Karachi, and they were hidden away. Their wings were taped, their tails were taped, to restrict their movement, and also supposedly to protect their feathers so as they're more saleable once they are smuggled out of the country. But health-wise, they were a lot of them were pretty grim because they're being fed very substandard food. They're being kept in closed conditions, so the air was fetid. And if people think, they want to sort of make jokes about Pakistani customs, when they seized these falcons, there was a very intense, for about 12 minutes, and I have the video personally to prove it, gunfight. These falcons were not given up. This is a considerable amount of money. 74 falcons on the illegal market is worth a considerable amount of money. So customs officers literally were involved in a gunfight to get these falcons. But then, as I say, one of the biggest problems we have over here is all the keyboard warriors know all there is. They know everything that you've been doing for 3 years behind the scenes. So they jump in with their rather ignorant comments sometimes, I'm afraid.
Yeah, I can understand that. That must have been a source of frustration. The falcons that were healthy but lacking in fitness, debilitated for want of a better word, was it quite easy to turn those around, to apply falconry techniques to getting them fit again for release?
It's basically just falcon husbandry. Again, a lot of people who have grown up in the modern era of falconry won't understand, because they've only ever flown birds that were bred in captivity. They won't understand the training and flying of wild birds. Unless it's an excessive period of time, a wild falcon, what we would call a passage, that's a youngster on its first passage, its migration, or a haggard, an adult bird, they don't lose muscle tone very quickly. They lose a certain amount, but it doesn't go away. You can keep one, I can't think why you would want to, but if you kept one sitting on a block for 2 months, it could still fly at the end. If it was a youngster, no, the muscle would deteriorate, or probably had never been built enough in the first place. So really it was a case of getting them in good condition, cleaning up the wounds where they'd been trapped. Also, a lot of them had wounds where they'd been so many kept so close together, even though they were hooded, they were biting each other. So there were lots of bite wounds. There were lots of wounds on the feet where they'd been snared. All simple things, but left, they go septic, they cause sepsis, and the bird dies. So they had to be treated, which now they are. I'm going back on the 15th of January for a month, because the trapping season will then be over. And between myself and the officials from the Pakistan Falconers Association and also their wildlife department, we've worked out where various groups of falcons, not all together but staggered, will be released, because we have to take into consideration migration routes, food availability, other raptors that are already indigenous. So a considerable amount of planning has gone in. This is why I know it's coming across wrong probably, but I get so frustrated when people say, well, why don't you just let them go? It's never as simple as that. We could let them all go, and within a week they'll probably be dead or retrapped. So it needs far more work and consideration than that. And that's why I'm going back on the 15th of January for a month. For the first 2 weeks of that month, 3 other British falconers will join me and help, all paid for at their own expense. They will then return, and then in the second 2 weeks, 2 Dutch falconers and an Irish falconer will come over and give me a hand or give not just me, but everybody a hand. So there'll be quite a group working hard to get these 74 falcons back into the wild. And on my final day there this time, we had 8 more falcons brought in that have been confiscated. So they obviously will be a part of this as well.
That must have been quite frustrating, having to leave at the stage where another 8 had arrived.
It was, but everything had, visas and all the rest of it, dictate when you have to go, etc. One thing I just will note, just as a little kick at Britain, my COVID test, so I get my fit to fly certificate here, the cheapest I could get was £225. In Pakistan, I went to a absolutely first class medical facility, and I had my COVID test and my fit to fly certificate for $40.
What a difference.
Ridiculous, just ridiculous. So 225 quid and about 30 quid.
What was the limiting factor preventing releases going ahead while you were there? Was it the trapping season?
It was because of the sub judice. This was still subject to the court. These were illegal falcons traps, so nothing could happen to them until the court case was finished, and also the trapping season. But the vast majority of the falcons, the vast majority were migratory. So we need the trapping season to be over. We need sub judice to be finished, so then revert to the property of the Pakistan people, and they can then be released. And until that date is reached, which is the 15th of January, which is why I'm then going back, and all the subsequent releases are planned from that point onwards. But that's why. We won't be breaking the law. Two, we'd be subjecting to being retrapped, and three, they struggle to survive.
I saw on the Project Lugger Facebook page, which is updated very regularly, I saw a photograph of you doing some procedures with the birds, the hooded falcons, including weighing, and I think you were ringing them as well. What did the work typically involve, Bob?
Well, first of all, as we all know, if you just fly one or two falcons, you don't need to weigh them every day. You should have enough knowledge you can see. But when you're dealing with 74, you need some form of plan, some form of structure. Now, because they were illegal, the first thing that was done when they were microchipped. Now, Project Lugger donated 100 microchips because that's what we do. So every bird was microchipped. So therefore, it's now traceable and accountable. So we set up a daily plan where each falcon was weighed every day at approximately the same time. It's either up or down weight noted, its food was noted. So if one suddenly dropped a little bit of weight, we'd get a clue that it wasn't well. If it was picking up in weight, we would know that we're on the right track. Also, the daily weighing meant we can inspect, like the ones that had cuts on their feet from being noosed, it was marked on the chart, so we could check them each day, make sure they were healing as they should. If not, put some cream on, some powder, or whatever the particular treatment was. So it gave a basic routine and a way of checking each individual bird every day. And it's also something that, because when I came back, can be continued, because we'd drawn up all the charts before we left. Every bird is numbered. We've now put, they're split rings, but it means every bird is identifiable. It can be double checked by checking the microchip.
For the raptor biologists and conservation biologists watching this, what sort of data were you collecting, if it's possible to say?
Very little usable, to be honest, because obviously it was information received. I don't know how, I'm not privy to what the police or customs do, that this consignment was seized. But on being seized, the people who were looking after the falcons were the bottom of the supply chain, if you like. They were just the jumping off stage between being trapped and being smuggled out. So they couldn't even tell, and I'm sure they didn't genuinely know. I don't just think it was a code of silence type of thing, but they couldn't say where each bird had been trapped or had, the location it had come from. So we know they're migratory. We know the traditional migratory routes, but where particular birds had come from, we have nothing. So the only thing we can draw is there were something like 38 peregrines, of which 38 female peregrines, of which 5 were calidus peregrines, as opposed to Peregrinus peregrinus. There are also some red-nape shaheens and, as I say, some sakers and a few luggers. So the only thing you could draw from that is a percentage of straight peregrine to calidus peregrine, but what you say is I have no idea.
What's a little bit about the natural history of the species, please, Bob? What's their native range in the wild?
Sakers used to be found in Pakistan many, many years ago, but they've long since been trapped out and gone the Gulf. So, but sakers are still found in Mongolia, Russia, certain parts of Europe, etc. But the ones from Mongolia, Afghanistan, etc., they do migrate down through Pakistan, through the Gilgit area and Peshawar area down into Baluchistan. That's where we assume a lot of them are trapped, is in Baluchistan, which is relatively close to Karachi.
And
But you know, we as Europeans, we don't understand the culture. And the other thing is, I do have some sympathy. You can't condemn people. I condemn the illegal traders and the people who are making the big money. But if you take a little man in a village who has a wife and 3 children, and he can feed his wife and 3 children for a year by trapping a Saker falcon, who are we to say he shouldn't be doing it? We can say he shouldn't be doing it if we offer an alternative. But if it was a case of I did something wrong, but I could feed my family, or if not, we were in severe trouble, like most people, I would do what was required for my family. So we can't condemn out of hand the actual trappers. What we can condemn out of hand is the middlemen, and worst of all are the end users, because they know the various stages that things have gone through to get to them, but they don't care. Money overrides everything, and their desire overrides whatever else. So that is wrong. But these things are being worked on quietly behind the scenes. All these keyboard warriors who say you should be doing this and you should be doing that just don't know what's going on behind the scenes.
would you say the expedition was a success, Bob?
A major, major success. I literally had a letter from the minister of one of the departments in Pakistan saying that without our very, very publicised presence, they wouldn't have had the courage to carry on and do 2 more raids whilst we were there. We did massive amount of interviews for various TV channels and newspapers, all because it's the first time anything like this has ever happened in Pakistan. And it's not because of Project Lugger, but Project Lugger did contribute towards it and will continue to contribute. That's why we're going back.
Is there anything else you'd like to add, Bob?
No, not really. I just think people should have more faith in other people.
There's just one more question that I have, and that is, what is the current estimate, please, for the world population of wild luggers? Do we know?
There's no accurate figure. The guesstimate, which is what it is around 1,200 birds. But that's a guesstimate. I mean, it could be slightly more, it could be considerably less. The only thing is we do know is every time I speak to a conservationist in India or in Pakistan, they tell me how things were different 10 years ago, how many more birds there were 10 years ago. And people, you know, for wildlife photographers tell you traditional sites that they've always went to are no longer occupied. So it is still a very worrying situation, but we can only do what we can do and keep plugging away.
And I'm guessing the trend in the population is that it's decreasing?
Very much so. I mean, things like peregrines are increasing because of conservation methods and because of universal acceptance. But you also have to bear in mind, we're dealing a great deal with India, for example. Luggers are found in India, Pakistan, excuse me, what was Burma, Myanmar. Now take India, right? If I come to you as a major corporation and want to get some sponsorship to help save lugger falcons, in the same country, you're trying to save the snow leopard, the tiger, the Asiatic lion. You know, what's going to be more iconic? A rather dull brown falcon or a snow leopard? You know, we face an uphill battle in a lot of what we do, but it doesn't stop us. We keep going.
Bob Dalton, thank you very much indeed for being
Pleasure.
on the Practical Animal Channel.
Pleasure. Take care, John. Cheers now.
Again, now, bye-bye.